happy, so that's what I've been focused on.
How do you think your team will be better than last year?
Well, a couple ways. One, we know we need to be better. I think, it's no secret, obviously, we weren't good enough last year. We just weren't. And there's a lot of different reasons for that, and it's something we spent a lot of time thinking about. I think really what it comes down to is a combination of a couple things. I think, we brought in a lot of players who I think have a chance to contribute in different ways. Some of them are veterans, and then we also have some interesting young players, some who came from the outside, and a lot coming from within that I think have a lot of upside that we need to tap into and we need to help them reach.
Are you planning to, have you talked to Carla about that article that appeared last week?
Yeah, we talked when it came out. Look, before we hired Alex back, obviously he and I talked extensively about everything that went on in Houston. Publicly, he's been as accountable as anybody who was involved in that. He's our manager. We're happy he's here. We're focused on what we're trying to do this year.
What's your message to Red Sox fans this year? After a tough year last year, no signing of Xander, what's your message to them?
Well, I appreciate their passion, and we're going to try to make them proud. Obviously, we didn't do that last year. We just weren't good enough. So we need to be better. We know we need to be better, and we they have told us we need to be better, but we didn't need our fans to tell us that. We know it, and that's what we're focused on here, and that's the focus we're going to bring every single day here. We got a chance every day from now until the season starts, and then obviously during the season, but every day out here we got a chance to get better. And one thing when I think of good spring trainings I've been a part of, it's that there's been focus and a sense of purpose from day one. You could feel that even seeing our players come together at winter weekend. You could feel some of that already starting. Definitely felt it today, and that's a big part of what we're trying to do.
As far as roster construction goes, did you change mindset as far as the new rules? You have to take into account, range a little bit more with infielders, how guys recover after pitches with the pitch clock. Do you have to take any of that into account?
You have to take everything into account. We've spent a lot of time, even going back to the tail end of last season, anticipating some of the things that were being talked about, and then as these things started to become reality, just trying to look into any way we could how they might impact the game. And so we have done some work on that, and it's obviously going to be a huge emphasis with getting players ready for the season this spring. But at the same time, I think you can't get too far away from the fundamentals of the game. Those I don't think are going to change in a big way. A lot of the things that are important in terms of throwing strikes, in terms of grinding quality at bats, in terms of playing the game the right way, focus, those are all still going to matter. They might even matter more than they ever have. And we have to make sure we're prioritizing those too.
Are there things you can take advantage of there, like maybe pitchers quick pitching a bit more? Talk to a couple guys here. As far as stealing bases, you only get to throw it once. Can you take advantage of some of that in your club?
Yeah, that's something I've talked about a little bit, is I think the mindset we need to have around these rules. When they were starting to be talked about last summer, you would see a lot of guys talk more in terms of what the rules were going to do to them, or that's in any case how the questions usually were phrased. And for me, we have to look at how we're going to win within this system and what advantages we can create. I think our coaching staff is really well equipped to do that, just with the baseball minds we have on the staff. It's a really cool opportunity. We know there's going to be 30 clubs battling to see who can be best equipped to win with these new rules. And so that's something we take seriously, and it's going to be a fun challenge.
What rule do you think will have the biggest impact?
They're all happening at the same time, so I don't know that it makes sense to try to dissect them and pull one apart from the other. They all kind of interact. At the end of the day, these rules are here to try to get to a better version of the game, a more exciting version of the game. That's something I support. I think we're in the entertainment business, and baseball is an amazing game. We owe it to everybody who loves baseball to have the most exciting, most engaging version of this game. So to the extent that it's going to be a faster, more exciting version of the game we love, I think that's great, and that's something that we should be ready for.
Chaim, in addition to pace of play, it seems that an obvious goal of some of the rule changes is to emphasize athleticism, to bring that action and all of that. Given that, do you think that this roster is athletic enough, both in general and more specifically to take advantage of some of the rule changes?
Yeah, that's something that I feel like we've talked about it every year I've been here is trying to play faster and get more athletic, and it's something that has been an emphasis. Now, obviously, we've got a couple of our best athletes who are working back from injury, but it's really at the end of the day that what the game kind of demands of us is adjustments. It demands those adjustments at a fast pace, and a lot of those happen on the fly. And it's been a huge emphasis here. It doesn't just go to the composition of the roster. It goes to the situation we put guys in, the way we prepare them. That's all really part of it. So I like the group we have in terms of the athleticism, in terms of what different guys bring to the table, and excited to see how it comes together.
Given the injury issues with some of your middle infielders, do you feel like you'd want to add to the depth there, or are you comfortable where you are?
We like who we have, but we're going to continue to look to add to this group. Obviously, we've got some guys who with Trevor, we know we'll be without him, without Alberto. We're still working on a timetable there as we progress him. So we're going to keep looking at.
Howard,
Do you think, do you think more in the second base kind of ballpark, or just sort of a guy you can play both ways?
The more able they are defensively, the better. I think especially early on, like adding some shortstop capability too would be good, just to make sure we're well insulated there.
how are tickets saved this year?
That is definitely not my department. Everything I've heard is actually that we're doing pretty well in that department. That tickets are selling, but it's definitely out of my department and above my pay grade.
When you look at some of the projection models, they have you around 80 wins, 81 wins. Why do you think you'd be better than that?
Well, it's not for me to dissect some of those external projections. We look at them, we compare them against a lot of things internally, and sometimes I think when you're looking at those, you need to look at the assumptions that are going into them, in terms of how they handle different factors, and especially what they're expecting of certain guys in terms of roles, in terms of playing time, obviously in terms of talent. We know we're in for a battle in this division, and the schedule's changed, but even so, this division, I think top to bottom, last year was probably as good as it's been in my whole career, and I've spent basically my whole career in this division. I think it's probably going to be even better this year, so we know we're in for a battle. Our job, I think, is to help every guy on our roster reach their top end, and I think if we do that, or if we come close to doing that, we're going to be in a really good position. But we can't really worry too much about where people have us projected. Like I said, I don't blame people for having us projected wherever they have us projected. We weren't very good last year. We know that, so we got to be better.
Speaking of the division, do you think you benefit from playing fewer games in the division?
I think anybody in the AL East who does not answer yes to that question is probably lying to you. But at the same time, we're still going to play our division a lot, and the other 25 teams in the game are pretty good too. So we really just have to take whoever's on our schedule that day and go after them with full intensity.
And how do you view specifically the center field spot? Is it going to be Duvall or Duran? How do you sort of view that, especially considering Kike he's going to start the season at shortstop?
Yeah, this is a picture that could change as the season goes on. Obviously, at the outset, Kike will be our shortstop, and we'll see just how he progresses as we go through the year. So, we're looking for Duvall to see a lot of time out there. I don't think it'll be all on his shoulders. We know he can play out there. We also know with him, as with every player, we got to take care of him. Make sure we're not asking too much of any one guy, especially early on as we're getting into the season. It is a marathon, so I think we'll see a lot of Duvall out there, but it won't be all on his shoulders.
Any first impressions of Yoshida? You're actually seeing him on a baseball field?
Yeah, I still haven't seen him on a baseball field yet. It's been kind of running around a lot today. Got to talk to him a little bit when he came in for the press conference. Talked to him again this morning. What I've actually heard from other people who've been around him the last few days, obviously, some of you guys who've been here, you've seen him on the field and seen what he can do. What has stuck out to people here has been more about how he's been in there. And even with the language barrier, the comfortability inside the clubhouse, how he follows the game. He knows he's going to be adjusting to a whole new league, a whole set of different pitchers. He follows this league very closely. He knows who these guys are. He already knows a lot of things baseball-wise about who his teammates are, which is true of some players, but not something you can take for granted. That's been what I've gathered from talking to staff about him, and just, again, despite the language barrier, just mixing right in and getting to know people, and really invested in his work and in getting to know his teammates.
Getting back to Pete's question about projections, so setting aside the actual number of projections, like most projection systems do have you guys behind where they projected you a year ago at this time. Do you view your roster right now as being better than it was, better, worse, the same as it was a year ago entering spring training?
You know, I think some of the reason for that is probably because of some of the things we didn't accomplish last year in terms of helping along some of those players that we were counting on. And like I said, we all did not get out of everybody on this roster what we needed to. And that's going to reflect itself, you know, in terms of both external projections. It's going to reflect itself in terms of what we see on our plate for this year. So there's definitely meat on the bone there to help some of these young players take the next step, and even with some veterans to get more out of them. You know, there's guys on this roster who will tell you, veteran players that didn't have the year that they wanted to have last year, that, you know, I don't think is reflective of the talent they've shown, but is something that, you know, any projection system is going to factor in. So we got to be aware of that. And like I said, we can't really worry about that. We have to worry about what's the best version of any player on our roster. How do we get them there? And, you know, it's unrealistic to think that of 62 guys in camp, you're going to get 62 guys to their absolute best version, but that needs to be our goal. And if we're focused on that, we'll be able to get a lot of them closer to that than, you know, than they were last year.
You've mentioned, I think, in a couple of interviews that you felt like perhaps the fit of the parts last year was not what it needed to be. How different is that this year?
I do think the roster that we have here now, that, you know, understanding there's still some decisions that need to be made and there's still some timetables that need to be set for guys coming back from injury, I do think the roster should fit together better than it did last year. That's something that we spent some time looking at. You know, there's always going to be things that are unexpected. There's always going to be things that you know you can't prepare for specifically, but you know you have to prepare for some different things happening. And just making sure that we're covering a lot of those what ifs as best as we can was a focus of ours. And I do think we should be better equipped to do that. We are asking some different things of different guys, but you know, in terms of having guys playing out of position or not necessarily being insulated against certain different things happening, that's something we spent a lot of time talking about this winter, and my hope is that we'll be better prepared for it.
Kike said that he thought it was important that the group changed up the clubhouse culture. I know you've said that you thought you had a great group last year in that way. Yesterday he said it was a group that was comfortable being in last. Alex disagreed with it today. I wanted to get kind of your sense on those things from him.
Yeah, I'm not, but I'm actually glad he feels that way. I'm glad he's taking a leadership role because, you know, it's like I said, we need to be better. And when you have somebody who's as invested in making that happen as Kike has been, really going back to last September, and, you know, the tone in the clubhouse that I saw in September was not that, but I'm glad he feels that way because I think it's going to pay dividends for us this year.
But does he have the resume to do that? I mean, he's not Xander Bogaerts. Does he have the resume to be that guy?
I don't think. What do you mean in terms of does he have the resume?
I mean, Xander's an all-star, you know, and he keeps talking about the culture of the team. It's just, you know, two different things. I mean, you know, he's a guy that's a multiple position player.
Yeah. I don't think he needs to be anybody other than himself. You look around the league, and actually, you know, from my standpoint, you can look at some of the really good Red Sox teams that we've seen here in the past, and the guys who set the tone in the clubhouse are not necessarily always the guys with the most all-star appearances or the longest resumes or the most pages in the media guide or whatever. I think being willing to take that leadership role, being comfortable enough in your own skin to be able to do it, is a big part of actually having that land and having it work within the clubhouse. It's not always the guys with the most all-star games under their belt.
How you talk about culture, obviously you guys have had a lot of turnovers. How much does that matter in a clubhouse when you're trying to go out there and succeed on the field?
You know, it all depends on who's coming in. I mean, from my standpoint, actually really over the last number of years, we've brought in a lot of guys that I think are high character guys that are really good guys in the clubhouse. You know, I think we tried to focus on that this winter, but I think it's something we focused on last winter, and I think we ended up bringing a lot of really good people to this group, and we focused on it before 21. And, you know, I think did the same thing. So obviously the mix is a little different every year. I think it's important whether you have a lot of turnover or a little turnover. You want to make sure that the guys you're bringing in and that the way that the group comes together is as good as it can possibly be. Sometimes that's hard to predict. You can bring in a lot of high character guys and, you know, it may not click the way you hoped. It may not click on the field, it may not click off the field. And sometimes the way things come together can surprise you positively in ways you didn't anticipate, but it's something that I think has to be an emphasis, not just to have a good clubhouse, but especially to have a good clubhouse in a place like Boston. You want to go after guys, and I do think like Kike, this is one of the reasons we targeted him before 21. You want to go after guys who are going to be able to embrace everything that the Boston baseball experience brings.
Hi, home run power was down last year, obviously. You lose 3 guys that were in the top 5 of your team with home runs last year, including Trevor Story, who will be back. But like you had Duvall and everything, you had Turner. Where do you think? Like, do you think you'll hit more home runs than that last year? Do you cover there?
Well, I hope so, because we obviously didn't hit very many last year, and even if we had, I would still hope that we hit more homers. You know, I obviously we saw some guys, excuse me, some guys last year not have their usual power output. I'm optimistic we'll be in a better place with that this year, but if we're going to be in a better place with that, it's going to come because we have good at-bats. It's going to come because we grind at-bats. It's going to come because we swing at the right pitches, have a good approach. I know there was a huge emphasis for Pete, for Alex down the stretch. You know, we saw some dividends come out of that in September. A lot of those things happen because you're putting pressure on the opposition by being in good counts, by getting guys on base. So really, if you have good at-bats 1 through 9, guys are going to be able to get to their power because you're going to put pressure on pitchers and put yourself in situations to get pitchers to hit.
What did you see with Tristan during the month that he was there that made you guys confident enough to trade Oscar or DFA then trade Oscar or DFA Oscar during the offseason? I was on maternity leave, so I had to.
We know.
And like obviously, are you guys expecting? I mean, he's a young player, so I mean, would you expect other guys?
Yeah, there's going to be ups and downs with most young players. You know, the ones that stick in our minds are that small handful of guys who just take the league by storm. The fact of the matter is, most really good players do not do that. There are going to be ups and downs, and you know, any team, whatever your aspirations, whether you're a veteran team or not, you need to have space for those young players to succeed and be willing to ride out some of those ups and downs. Otherwise, you're never going to see what they can do. What we saw from Tristan when he was up here was a really mature at bat every time. The results weren't always there, but in terms of the pitches he swung at, how he approached pitchers, how he learned, that was a big reason why we wanted to give him that exposure, just so he could get his feet wet at the highest level, understand what pitchers are trying to do to him. This guy is an incredibly thoughtful hitter. He's so passionate about his craft. He takes in information really, really well. And we gave him something last year to be able to process. And you know, you could see it was a quality at bat every time. We didn't always get the outcome. Obviously, he didn't show up in the batting average. He did show the power. But the quality of the at bat, the pitches he swung at, the pitches he didn't, that was something that was difficult for us all year, was putting together quality at bats. And you could pretty much count on one no matter the outcome every time he came up. I would bet on that being a really good indicator of the type of hitter somebody's going to be, especially when they have power.
At this point, this team is largely a product of your decisions, with a few exceptions. Do you think, is this where you thought you'd be at this point? You feel like you're a contender at this point, or kind of 4 years in? How satisfied or not satisfied are you with where you are?
My nature is that I'm almost never going to be satisfied. There's really only one outcome to a season that is going to be truly satisfying, and I haven't achieved it yet. And we have not, while I've been here as a group, achieved that yet. So, you know, in terms of that, no, of course not. Obviously, you don't know exactly how it's going to go. There's been some things that I think have worked better than expected, and some situations that haven't. So you try to learn from all that, from the successes and then from the things that don't work out as well. My mindset is not to be satisfied, and certainly not after a year like 22 where we weren't very good.
Did Story's injury maybe change things in terms of, what the ceiling is for this team?
I don't think it changes the ceiling, but it certainly is a tough blow. He's a really good player, and having gotten a lot of the adjustment to a new place, the first time in his career he was coming to a new place, having gotten a lot of that out of the way, I was really excited to see what he was going to do next. We all were, we still are. We're just going to have to wait for it, and that's tough because he's really good. I think you talk about some of the changes in the game and how they're going to benefit athletes. I think he's exactly the type of player that is going to thrive with all these adjustments because he is such a dynamic athlete. So it stinks that we're not going to have him for however long it is that we don't have him. Nothing we can do about that, but it's going to create opportunity for other guys, and we're going to learn some more about other guys and hopefully be in a good spot when he comes back.
You said in Springfield that you can't assume that he's going to come back this year. Do you guys have any further, maybe insight on that as to when he could possibly come back?
Yeah, no, well, we don't really yet, other than that he's really getting after it, as you would expect. I mean, you guys have been around him, how seriously he takes this, how hard he works. He's in a really good spot. He's making good progress. It's still early. For me, it just didn't make sense to put a timetable on that. I know what, generally speaking, the timetables are around these things. I know where his head is at in terms of coming back and playing this year. It's just, in the immediate aftermath of that happening, I didn't think it made sense to set a timetable. And I still don't, but everything's been going great with him. At this stage, we're still early in the rehab where it's really about strength, it's about range of motion. He's doing great on all those dimensions, but we're not close to being able to put a timetable on it.
Is there a chance Montessor is ready for opening day?
There's still a chance, that's not something I would bet on, but that's no different from, when we acquired him, that we said, look, there's a possibility, but on one hand, he's such a good athlete that you don't want to put anything past him in terms of once he really gets going and gets momentum, he could progress very quickly. On the other hand, because he's such a dynamic athlete, we want to make sure he's really ready so we and he can feel he's in a position to just be fully unleashed when we do activate him. So, again, we don't have a timetable on that yet. He's been working really hard. Our staff's been pushing him, which is something we planned to do and were prepared to do when we got him. It was great that he reported here immediately after the trade so that he could get with our people. And they've been pushing him hard, and he's been working hard. But the opening day is still something that I think is best case scenario.
Are there any other guys that are injuries have popped up or behind or anything like that?
No, everybody else is as a group pretty much, broadly speaking, where we expected. I mean, out of the chute here early, we're going to handle different guys differently in terms of their schedules, but everybody else is on track.
Given some of the roster crunches that you have experienced in the last few weeks and the calendar, could you pretty much rule out bringing in anyone else on a major league deal at this point?
No, I wouldn't rule that out. We know we have one player in Trevor who is going to go on the 60-day when it's time. So, that can create a spot. And kind of beyond that, I think even independent of Trevor, we want to still be opportunistic. And we will be as camp goes on. Obviously, we also want to be mindful of the fact that, we're not in a position where the bottom of our 40-man roster are guys that we can sneak through waivers or, that we don't value. So that has to factor into it too.
Are you kind of in active discussions with any prospective free agents at this point?
There's some different guys that we've had conversations with, yeah. I don't expect that to change even as camp rolls on. I think as you get deeper into camp and you start getting into games, a lot of those conversations start shifting, to who's available with other clubs as their rosters are coming together. That's something that we can and should be monitoring closely. But yeah, we've been talking to some different players.
Another of your favorite topics, potential extensions for pre-ARB or younger players. I know you say you don't comment one way or the other, but I'm asking you to comment one way or the other.
Yeah, I won't get into it specifically on the talks on specific players, but this is something I've actually have commented about, and you know, something I believe in is it's something we should be in the business of doing when there's a match. It both has to be that we've identified the player, both the talent of the player and the person, as somebody that we want to invest in, and also that the player sees it as something they want to do, and you align on the terms. You know, safe to say those are conversations we believe in, that we're going to have. You know, I'm not going to get into it on any specific individual, but it is something that I think, as much as we can with the right guys, we should be in the business of doing.
When you have a guy like Casas in Springfield, essentially saying, yeah, I'd be open to that, you know, how much of that is a signal to you that there is a potential match there?
Well, you know, now we're getting into specific guys that I don't want to talk about, but you know,
Just,
most
just
cases.
in general, I mean, you know, you're,
Yeah.
you're looking, as you said, you want to match up, right? You want the guy wants to be here. Here's a guy publicly saying, yeah, that's something that interests me. You know, how much does that push the conversation forward theoretically?
Yeah, look, I hope we're having enough, you know, private conversations that we don't need to scan media reports to find that stuff out. You know, it's obviously good anytime a player says that. You know, to me, it means that they like it here, that they could see themselves being here for a really long time, that they can see themselves, you know, trading off some upside for, you know, the certainty of being here, and that's something that they want to do. I take that as a compliment. Really, probably to our development staff, to a lot of people in the organization. So it's nice to see.
You said multiple times during the offseason you thought you'd make, you know, I don't know, big impact trade or like a pretty, you know, have a sizable impact through that avenue. Were you surprised that, you know, I know you made a couple of, you know, deals toward the end, but were you surprised that that market never really developed league-wide? It seemed like it was slower than normal.
Yeah, it was an interesting winter in that regard. I'm hopeful that we do see impact from the trades we did make. But you know, it was something where, you know, around the industry, at least to this point, I mean, we could be surprised as we get into spring training. Usually it's not a time when those types of things happen, but that doesn't mean it couldn't. I know conversations around the league, at least as far as we could tell, were as vigorous as ever, but it seemed that there just wasn't as much activity on that front this winter, at least to this point, around the industry.
Is that because a lot of teams think they're going to contend and want a major league talent from your point of view?
I think there's a lot of different reasons. This, to me, was something that wasn't just because of one thing. I think there are a lot of different factors that played into it, that have played into it. At the end of the day, obviously, you have 30 teams all trying to do what's best for them. So a lot of different things are going to fall out of that. But I don't think it was for any lack of conversation, but you know, for whatever reason, it just wasn't as big a feature of this offseason around the league as we sometimes see.
You will have 7 different pitchers who can potentially start. Is it ideal for you guys to start the season with a 5-man rotation, or you're open to anything else?
We're still talking through it. You know, sometimes the trade-offs with that are, you know, you want to make sure that you're not putting too much strain on the bullpen. And, you know, however we open, I do feel pretty confident we're going to make sure that we're taking care of these guys out of the chute. You know, and really that gets, you know, beyond the 7 guys you're referring to. There's other guys who started games for us this past year in the big leagues who fall into that group of guys who have upside beyond what they did last year. You know, they're all going to be part of this puzzle. So how we come out of the gate, we're still talking through, and we're going to see how guys come along. But, you know, it's really going to be about finding the best way to win and take care of guys for the entire 6-month period.
Thank you.
Cool.
What did you think of the penalty on the Eagles?